everyone. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good. So thank you so much for taking the time of coming here to listen to my presentation. I'm like really impressed by the fact that you guys are spending all your Saturday with us. And I just want to really thank David because the way he has organized and coordinated is really professional. Believe me, I've been invited several times, but I have never been in a position that I receive precise information to make this work like a clock. So let's give him a round of applause because he is quite impressive. So what I want to do today is to take the time to introduce myself a little bit so you guys kind of get a sense of who I am and where I'm coming from, and also to show some research that I have done in the past decade that relates exclusively on issues of community college students in a large urban community college district that I just let your imagination guess where that is. So, as David said, my name is Tatiana Melguizo. Some of you might be wondering about the accent. I'm originally from Colombia. I'm an economist by training, and I came to the US to do a PhD in economics of education. And you guys might be wondering, what is economics of education? So economics of education is the way economists think about schools. So how shall we allocate scarce resources in order to serve better the populations of students? And since the very beginning, I focused on issues of higher education. So that means that I have been studying the trajectories of students, in particular students of color and low-income students as they transition from community colleges to four-year colleges. So that's what I have been doing, and that's what I have been devoting my life to, and I'm really excited to see that some of you are even interested in not only in becoming doctor, but also to devoting your life to supporting community college students, which I think that is one of the largest engines of access and equity that we have not only in California, but in the country as a whole. Okay, so what I'm going to be presenting today, I tried not to make it very technical, but I really want to challenge you and engage you, and at the end, I include like a website link that includes all the reports and all the papers that I have written, so you have access to all of the material. Okay? So the title is Learning from Experimentation in Developmental Math in Community Colleges in California, Results from a Long-Term Research Partnership. And I want that you guys think about the word research partnership, because this is very important. This is very important as you become researchers, that you realize that you cannot do this on your own, that you have to really connect with the practitioners and the leaders and the students and really get a good contextual understanding of the problems before you engage in designing research. Sometimes it's very easy for quantitative economists to get access to a data set and run this very sophisticated analysis, but what I want to remind you is that you should never forget that every single number represents a student, a family, and a trajectory, and you have to be very mindful as quantitative researchers of how this research is impacting the life of these individuals and these communities, and you have to have a very good understanding to avoid any type of preconceptions that might end up inadvertently hurting populations of students that you want to support. So always avoiding having like a deficit mindset when we are approaching issues of urban education and issues of access and trajectories in college, in the community college setting. The other key word here is experimentation, because California is a very unique place. So you guys probably have lived most of your life here, So you just use the way California and the government works, but this varies by states like Texas. So in Texas, you would have like the governor give a mandate, and every single community college president has to do what the governor say. California, it is very different, and there's a lot of power within the community colleges, which you would say it's good. And there's a student voice, and there's a very loud faculty voice, and there's leader voices, and all these voices have to somewhat agree in a very complicated governance process for policies to pass. So again, kind of having you think hard about the contextual understanding of the places that you're studying, because that's the only way that you can generate any change. You cannot just go and try to fix problems, because you are getting nowhere. You have to go and get a very good understanding of the problem. So I'm going to just give you a little bit more about myself. I like to put this slide because I'm very proud of being Colombian. And you know, sometimes Colombia doesn't get the best reputation, so I just want to serve as an ambassador and kind of like remind everyone in the US that Colombia is a wonderful country, that we just went through a peace process after a very difficult 50 years of civil war, and we are at a very good place. And there are like incredible higher education institutions that have been preparing very well students for centuries. So it's kind of like a reminder that for some of us might be obvious, but not for everyone. So I always like to kind of like take some time and say, I am very proud about being Colombia. This is where I come from, and what drives me. Why do I do this? I do this because if I show you this statistic, this is what really bothers me. In Colombia, only 25% of students from the lowest income socioeconomic status enter college, compared to 60% of the students of the highest income levels. So sometimes we get in the US so like focus on the inequalities in the US, which are also huge and has increased substantially over time. But it's important to also remember that these inequities persist around the world, and they are closer to us in Latin America, in Africa, in other developing countries. So that's what drives me. Like, why do we have these inequalities, and how can we design programs and policies to support our low-income students and students of color and have them attain the best educational outcomes that they can? This graph is also very powerful, and I like to show it. It's about a very famous French economist, Thomas Piketty, and he wrote a seminal piece that is called Capital in the 21st Century, and it kind of like it makes resonance to The Capital, which is the seminal piece by Karl Marx. So he was kind of updating, using a lot of data. He's a very strong quantitative economist, and he wanted to document inequalities, growth in inequalities throughout the world. So if you look at this graph, since the 1940s, the income gap between the top 10% and the lowest 90% has consistently increased. The good news is that there's some evidence that there were times at progressive social policies where we see the test score gap, and they only measure the test score gap between the white and the black students, and we see that test score gap kind of like decreasing, but then it kind of like stopped kind of like going down. It kind of like stays kind of stagnant. So when I came here and I was thinking, okay, what is the research that I really want to do? What I want to dedicate my life to? There was this whole discussion about affirmative action. And that at the time that it was kind of like the mid-90s when I started my PhD, there was the banning of the affirmative action policies in California. So I said, well, that's a really interesting and important challenge for an economist, for someone who is really passionate about asking the numbers
to confirm the arguments of the left or the right. And we were hearing the argument from the right that they were saying, well, those students, you're going to set them up for failure. They're not going to be able to succeed at the most selective elite institutions. So I was, okay, let's look at the numbers. And this is a difficult question because when you think about UCLA, UCLA is a very selective flagship institution and is selecting students who are more likely to graduate. So when we look at these really high graduation rates at UCLA, it's not that UCLA is doing an amazing job, it's that they're also doing an amazing job selecting people like you that they know have all the qualities and drive and academic preparation to succeed. So there are some statistical corrections to deal with those issues. I use like all my statistical power to try to address that question in a convincing way, because you know these are debates and you have to get your numbers and you have to defend your numbers, and people are going to go really aggressively questioning every single number, so you have to be prepared. And I came up with the finding that indeed our students of color were more likely to graduate if they were attending more selective institutions. And that specific finding ended up being published on a paper, and that paper ended up being cited in an amicus brief that the American Education Research Association sent up at the time that they were like revising these court cases. So the point that I want to make here is that I really encourage all of you to continue working really hard towards your PhD, because that will enable you to engage in research that will really make a difference, and you can, and your numbers and your information are going to help the causes that you cherish the most. So it's kind of like, it's a very hard journey, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of dedication, but that training is going to empower you, in my case, to use these numbers to evaluate these programs, to evaluate these policies, to give solid information to policymakers and practitioners to make changes that will support the most vulnerable populations. So that's how I think about research. So the research that I'm going to be presenting today are some findings from a work that resulted from a collaboration with a number of partners. When I arrived as an assistant professor at USC, there were some professors that had a very good relationship with a large urban community college district. So I decided to continue that relationship and to work with them and together decide what are the research questions that you really care about. Because sometimes researchers might kind of like devote a lot of time on issues that technically might be very interesting, that they could be important for the research agenda, but are not really contributing to the colleges, to helping the colleges be better. So I really wanted to make that connection with the colleges. I also made a collaboration with American Institutes of Research, and I mention this because for those of you who would like to continue in education with a PhD or economics or any social sciences, this is an interesting potential employer. The American Institutes of Research has offices all around, including California, and they engage in policy-relevant research. And this is a potential employer for you guys. And the purpose of the partnership was to really learn about what was going on in terms of developmental math in community colleges in this large urban district. Because I don't know if you guys remember, but about 5 or 8 years ago, there was a lot of press kind of documenting that developmental math was becoming like the major gateway. And given that all of you have gone through community college or are currently at community college, you will all relate when I say that when you have to enter the community college and take that AccuPlacer or take that Compass or take that MDTP, when you have no idea of the high stakes of this instrument, and that is going to end up placing you maybe in some levels of math below from what you achieve in high school, that is not correct. So what we wanted to know was to really understand the assessment and placement policies and practices that these colleges from this district were designing and implementing to make sure that they were supporting the students, that they were helping the students get this sometimes they're really referred to like the minimum requirement, or that gateway math course that you need to get your certificate, that you need to get your associate, or that you need to transfer into a STEM or social science discipline, into a CSU, UC, USC. So that's what we wanted. The site was Los Angeles Community College District, and we wanted to examine the impact and implementation of these test-based and alternative placement policies and the delivery methods. So, what did we do? We tried to build on the strengths of the different partners. So we paired with AIR for their technical expertise. We really value the expertise of the community colleges, the leaders, the faculty, and in USC we brought some community college expertise. So why do we care about this problem? Because we found out that every year about 80% of community college students in California are placed in preparatory mathematics. This is much higher than the national average. So sometimes you might have felt frustrated that you were placed in this lower level math, and this was the reality for hundreds of thousands of students in the district and millions of students. So that was like really disturbing for us. We know that community college students enter with different preparatory skills. We know that there's like variation in the quality of the high schools that students attend. So we know that we can expect that there's some variation. And we know that colleges have to offer classes that meets the level of the students. But we also wanted to make sure that these students were placed correctly. Otherwise, this was like decreasing their likelihood of succeeding. So we focused on this district because we had 9 colleges, over 130,000 students, a very diverse population of students. So we could really, in a sense, we have like a microcosm. We have like a nice way of looking at this district and then extrapolating the findings to other community college and similar districts all around the state, and in some cases in other states. So at that point, as I said before, there was like this tension, and when you're doing research, you always have to focus on this tension. So there were some people saying, we have to give remediation, we have to give basic skills, we have to give developmental math, we really need to help the students, it is really helping. And then you have the critics saying, no, the community colleges, the way they're doing it right now is not helping students, so it is just hurting them. So you have these two arguments. Remember when I was saying before, the two arguments of affirmative action, you have the pros, you have the cons. So when you're doing research, in a sense, you become like a referee. You have like these two conflicting arguments, and you're coming as a researcher with your data to try to paint a picture that will support the arguments on either side. So this is the developmental math sequence. I think many of you are familiar with it, that it goes as, it starts as early as arithmetic, move to pre-algebra, elementary algebra, or some of you guys might call it algebra 1, algebra 2, and then transfer level math. So it's a long sequence. So if I'm a student, I just graduated from high school, I finish my algebra requirement, I go to the community college, I take the acupuncture, I had a bad night, I was partying, I pay no attention, I don't care about the test, and then congratulations, you're placed in pre-algebra. And I'm like, what? And what? Students, in many cases, they don't understand that they can contest this. And the community colleges have systems that would not let you enroll in higher level math courses. It would only let you enroll at that level or below. So that is a problem. So again, kind of like showing you, and this is, you have to remember, these are several cohorts of students, so these are hundreds of thousands of students, and we look at the transcript levels, and this is where the students were placed after taking this test. That, as I said, in many cases, the students had no idea that they were high-stake tests and that they would probably could add 1 or 2 years for them in the community colleges. So we have that only 6% of the students were placed in transfer level courses. That goes back again to my statistic that over 80% of the students were placed in really low level courses. And then it took us a long time to try to understand how are students assessed and placed. And it is very cumbersome, and you all went through that. So you enter the college, then you have to send this paperwork, then you're going to be assigned, depending on the community college that you choose to go, you might have to take the Accuplacer or the Compass or the MDTP. Then you have to fill in some like background questionnaire that asks you something about your high school experience, something about how, if you plan to attend part-time or full-time, kind of like general questions. And then the students, this kind of like software is going to combine the scores that you got from this test with some multiple measures, which are like additional points that you might get for answering these questions. These magic numbers comes and spit a result, and you're being told, congratulations, go on. So we were like, well, this is not right, so we have to document and we have to show how this process is not the way it is currently designed, not really helping the students. So what we found, and I'm not going to give you all the technical details, I just want to give you kind of like the take-home message, is that unfortunately the faculty and of the colleges, they had really good intentions, but they were overstretched and they didn't have the resources to really focus on the right assessment and placement, and they continued to apply a system that had been developed years ago. So in some cases, these tests were used as what we call enrollment management tools. So imagine you're a college, you have these 100,000 students applying to the different colleges, and you have to place them in different math levels. So this test becomes an instrument of sorting students into the different buckets. This test is not what it's supposed to be, which is a way to approximate the learning in math that you attain in high school and help you match the right course that in an ideal world will have an instructor that will help you focus on those skills that you need to refresh and move as fast as possible into the college level math, which are the courses that you're here for, because you're in the community college, which is a 2-year college. But the reality is that it became a 5-year college, because what we found also by looking at the data is that our students are taking on average 5 years to transfer. So we think about 2-year community college students, that is a fallacy. 5 years to transfer. So that was clearly not working. Here in this graph, we also wanted to see how the students were progressing through the sequence. So what we saw is that once the students enroll in a course, they were quite likely to pass that course, but there were a lot of exit points. We found that a substantial number of students didn't attempt the course. So that's problematic, because what does that mean? That, well, we might be insecure about our math, we suffer with that math prerequisite in high school, we want to forget about that math, so what is the normal thing to do? Postpone, 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 and then this is going to come back and haunt us. So we demonstrated how colleges had the opportunity to really encourage students to attempt the courses when they were placed, because we had that 40% of the students who were initially placed in arithmetic didn't immediately attempt, about 30% of the students in pre-algebra didn't attempt, and then in intermediate algebra about 25% didn't attempt. So that's how the data, as a quantitative researcher, I'm using a figure that is friendly and that is kind of like showing the practitioners, look guys, why is this going on? Let's sit down with the faculty, with the matriculation coordinators, with the leaders, and think about ways to support our students and have them pass these math prerequisites as soon as they can. When they have their math probably fresher if they came from high school, or if they had been many years out of the job, in the job market, to help them kind of like go back. Then, this is kind of technical, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but I'll welcome specific questions at the end. I'm going to stay, and if we don't have enough time here, because I know that David has a number of presenters, so we can speak about that. But the other issue that is very important to study is that when you guys are taking this AccuPlacer, the way the colleges set the cutoffs, you don't know what the cutoff is, but that cutoff has a lot of implications. Why? Because if a group of faculty decide to put the cutoff really high, that means that a small number of students is going to go to the higher course, and a larger number of students is going to go to the lower course. If we set it too low, then we're going to have like a much larger number of students kind of in the higher level course, you see? So if it's too high, very few make it. If it's too low, more students can make it. And what we found was that we documented how different colleges that use the same test had different cutoffs. And we ask again, why? You're using the same instrument. This is what this college is telling me. This is the score to get into this Algebra 2. Why are you telling me that your score needs to be higher? So again, using numbers to help faculty and administrators think hard about these policy decisions that inadvertently were hurting some of the students, or many of the students, in many cases. So this is kind of like showing you what is the pathway. That we think, well, this test, like I didn't do that well, who cares? Well, who cares? So if I am below that cutoff that I just mentioned, what does that mean? I'm placed in arithmetic. What does that mean? I have to attempt arithmetic. Then I have to pass arithmetic. Then I would have to attempt pre-algebra. Then I would have to pass pre-algebra. Then I have to attempt Algebra 1, pass Algebra 1, attempt Algebra 2, pass Algebra 2, attempt college level. How many semesters? Like, are you guys counting? So it is really high stakes. These decisions are really high stakes. So I know that this is kind of depressing, but I'm going to be showing a much more positive outlook in a little while. Okay. So this, for those of you who are like really into statistics and econometrics, when we think about program evaluation, and this is something that I'm really passionate about, is like we really want to make a program works well. So what do? Let's think that I am going to invite these students to participate to this program. And I have like a sign-up sheet. And then all of you guys who are on a Saturday here, completely engaged, listening to me, you're going to sign. And then I'm going to evaluate this program, and I'm going to compare it to other programs on campus. Well, that's not valid. Why? Because I'm cream skimming. I'm taking the most incredible, motivated students who are here no matter where, who are doing the homework, and I'm comparing it with other students that are different. So is that comparison valid? No, for the purposes of evaluation. So it's interesting because the education field has kind of like moved towards like the medical field, where you guys have heard about these randomized control trials, and we want to test this diet pill, so we're going to have like this control, and then we're going to have this treatment group, and we're going to follow this population, and then we're going to see if the treatment worked or it did not work. So when we're thinking as researchers, when we're thinking as evaluators, sometimes these programs are so high stakes that we want to make sure is that we're comparing apples with apples. And I'm not saying, well, this program is great, but it's you who are great. It is not the program who is great. And if you remember what I was telling at the very beginning when I was like excited about my research on affirmative action, is like, well, how I can compare these students in the selective institutions if I'm selecting you? So that's when statistics come up. And that's when process of random selection comes up. So if I really want to get the impact of this program, what I'm going to propose as an evaluator is, I have this amazing group of students, all of you are an amazing group of students, and I'm going to randomly select some of you to participate in this program, and the others are not going to receive the program now. And if I'm a thoughtful evaluator, I'm going to be offering this later on, because you don't want to deprive populations of something that could help. And in some cases, if it does not help, well, then you kind of know that you have to make substantial changes. So when we are thinking as evaluators in social sciences, we have to approximate this. We have to make sure that we are comparing apples with apples. And one way of doing that is using this fancy term that is called regression discontinuity design. And what does that mean? That means that in the case that I was describing to you guys about this math test score with this cutoff, and I have these students just below the cutoff because they didn't sleep well, because they fought with the mom, like who know what happened the night before, and you have these students that barely pass the test. So if I compare, if I have a substantially large number of students who are just below that cutoff, and a substantially large number of students who are just above that cutoff, I could argue convincingly that these two groups of students are similar in terms of academic preparation, because the test score is pretty similar, and also these unobservable or psychosocial characteristics that you guys have probably heard a little bit about, like this motivation, academic self-efficacy, social self-efficacy, all these great psychological, some people talk about grit, some people talk about resiliency. So these are not your typical academic preparation skills, but these psychosocial skills that we know are also related to college outcomes and persistence. So we want students that are very similar, and then we can say whether this program worked or not. And this is the statistical procedure that we used in order to help the colleges find out whether they were setting those cutoffs right or not, whether the cutoffs were too high or whether the cutoffs were too low. And this is complicated. We'll talk about it, and hopefully you have the time at some point later in your PhD to engage with this piece that is very technical. But what this piece, the message that I want you to get from this graph, is that there's a lot of variation. And again, like, why do we have colleges setting the cutoff so differently when we have similar population of students from Los Angeles Unified School District, in many cases, high school feeders, charter schools? Like, why are these students so different that the colleges have to set the cutoffs in such a different way and put students in pathways that are not conducive to succeed? So that was kind of like one of the pieces of information of this assessment and placement. The other piece of information that we're interested in is that they were these commercially developed tests that I mentioned, the AccuPlacer and the Compass, and they were also, some of you might have taken this test that is called the MDTP, which is a diagnostic test. So the difference within the AccuPlacer is like you know, the GRE or the SAT, this computer adaptive. You have to answer these questions, and you know that if the question starts to get too easy, you're like, oh my god, this is not going really well, because these initial questions are the ones that are helping this computer place you where you are in terms of this academic continuum. Whereas the MDTP is different, it's going to diagnose areas in math where you need support. So maybe, yeah, you don't need to go back to arithmetic, but you need some support in fractions. Or you need some support with some algorithms, or like solving some system of equations. So what this MDTP is going to do is going to help the colleges create these ways of sorting students in the classes, but it's also giving the instructors information related to the areas where the students need support. In theory, that this diagnostic test should be better than this computer adaptive test. But then, as a scientist, it is my responsibility to find a way to test this statement in a scientific way and find whether the students who were placed using the MDTP versus the students who were placed using the AccuPlacer were succeeding in the same rate. So we, again, using some statistics, we ended up calculating the rates of error. So rates of error are how these tests placed students in courses below what they were predicted to pass based on their high school academic preparation. So if you passed up to pre-algebra, and I have all this information from your transcript, you should be placed in pre-algebra, maybe higher. If you took other courses, that might have helped. And if I see this software consistently placing students below, that means that there's a rate of error. And we found that the rate of error of the colleges that were using MDTP plus the subscores were much lower. So that's good. Yeah, the 76%. Okay. So we found that students placed using results from computer adaptive tests were more negatively impacted by the placement decisions that prior cohorts that were using the MDTP. Students were less likely to enroll and persist in the next math course. And consistent with other studies, we found that the diagnostic test can provide information on students' proficiency on a range of subtopics such as fractions, exponents, and reasoning, which can improve math placement decisions and or tailor instruction. So we advocated, and this is something that the Chancellor's Office in California has been advocating, which is the use of multiple measures. And multiple measures has been used in different ways, but it basically says that community colleges should take advantage of the high school transcript information that you guys bring in, because there's a lot of really valuable information there that the colleges should use to place you where you are more likely to succeed. And we found how some of these measures really help the students succeed. And it's very interesting because the use of these measures resulted from a lawsuit by MALDEF. Like in the 70s, they were saying, why is a majority of Latino students in these lower level developmental math courses? And with this lawsuit, what they gained was that the colleges had to use more than one test to assess and place students. And the way the colleges complied with the law were by asking these questions, these self-reported questions to the students. And what we found in our studies was that, yes, these questions are super important because it's an opportunity for the students to give really valuable information that is going to help the colleges place them in the courses where they are more likely to succeed. And right now in California, for those of you who are in tune with what's going on in terms of basic skills and assessment and placement, the chancellor was moving towards a common assessment, and that is no longer happening. So it's very interesting how you devote your life to studying all these policies, and then there's like a Senate bill, there's an Assembly bill, and the thing changes night and day from one day to the other. So personally, I think this is a very good decision, because after conducting all this research, I am very skeptical of using any single instrument that is not perfectly aligned to what students learn in high school and align with what students are expected to learn in the community colleges. And given that this test couldn't be developed for multiple reasons, the Chancellor's Office is asking colleges to place students based on high school transcript, which I think is great. And you guys would say, but this is so obvious, like how come they have not been using high school transcripts since day one? Well, we have, because of the governance structure, that the high schools and the community colleges don't speak to each other. And one of the wonderful things of being a community college student is that they don't request a lot of information from you. They make it very simple to increase the access and make it like really open to all the students. So you don't really need to upload any high school transcript or take any test before you enroll. But this is problematic because this is information that could really help you. So some community college districts like Long Beach have very strong collaborations with their high school systems, and they have been using the high school information to place students. And one of the most recent work that I'm doing with a number of graduate students is that we got access to the transcripts of a very large high school district with a lot of schools that feed into these community colleges. So we now have the possibility of like really identifying what are the pieces of the high school transcript information that is going to help the students get placed in the course where they are more likely to succeed. So in order to kind of like start summarizing this, another finding, we found that even though our research documented that students were really benefiting from these multiple measures and that some of the colleges were doing it, only 6% of the students were really benefiting from that. So it was another piece of information to the community colleges. Look, you really need to strengthen these multiple measures, because what we found is that when you combine the measures of the commercially developed test with this extra information, students are more likely to be placed in the right one, but not many students are benefiting from that. Very few students were benefiting. So I know that this is a lot, but I just wanted to kind of like give you guys like a broad overview of the research that I have been doing along with an amazing team of graduate students at the Rossier School of Education and practitioners at this large urban community college district. And the conclusions for the research are that engaging in research partnerships with large districts are a way of increasing research capacity of the districts, while for the researcher to gain a much more nuanced understanding of the context. The research findings not only contribute to knowledge, but are also policy relevant and actionable, and these researcher-practitioner partnerships can be conducive to high quality and high impact research. And to conclude, there's like a couple of months ago, like a month ago, we had a new Assembly Bill 705, which I think it's really powerful, and I'm very hopeful about this bill, which is basically telling community college leaders and faculty that they can only spend 1 year helping students get the developmental math and English that they need before they have to start taking college level courses. So there are going to be major changes throughout the 114 community colleges in California, because the Chancellor's Office said You want to start the students in arithmetic? Not happening. You have to find ways of creating co-requisites so the students take this extra math or English support at the same time when they're taking the college level courses that they're going to then transfer to UCLA, to USC, to the CSUs, anywhere around the nation, and they have something. So I am hopeful. I think that after producing research that is really depressing, because as I started by saying at the beginning, these are not numbers. These are hundreds of thousands of students that have to go back to arithmetic, and in some cases, some colleges had levels below arithmetic before they were afforded to take the college level math courses that they needed for their majors when they transfer. And if we think about a STEM major, we would be asking a student to spend 5 years before they take the pre-calc or calc, and then transfer and continue taking all the prerequisites of a STEM major. So I wanted to leave it here, and I wanted to open it up for questions. Yes? You.
So among the different methods of kind of dictating where a student should go following high school, how do you, I guess, qualify one reason over the other?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So what I would say with some level of confidence is that colleges should not be using these commercially developed tests, because these commercially developed tests are not really helping students. What I would also say is that we cannot deny that there's variation in terms of academic preparation, and we want to make sure that the students have the level of support that they need. But we don't want to give so much support that we ended up hurting them. So I would advocate that using some sort of diagnostic test and using a lot of information from the high school transcripts is going to help get at that. And there's examples of community colleges around California, and bear with my bad pronunciation, the College of Cuyamaca, you know how to pronounce Cuyamaca. In San Diego, they have developed this system of co-requisite. So that means that at the same time that you're taking, if you want to get your AA and the math prerequisite is Algebra 2, and you, because of the high school transcript information, you are invited to take this course. You're going to take this course simultaneously at the same time where you're taking a college level course. So you're kind of like progressing in terms of credits, and you're not being kind of like stuck taking all developmental math and developmental English. And we didn't even talk about ESL, which is a whole complex issue that affects a substantial number of students that are not international students, that are English language learners that were diagnosed as English language learners in high school in California. Yeah. Time for questions. Yeah.
You mentioned that you wanted like something like a diagnostic that was more relevant to high school, to see how they did in high school. And for a lot of reasons it wasn't created. What are some of the reasons that you think?
So the problem is that the systems are not articulated. So if I'm a community college matriculation officer, I cannot get access to your high school transcript. So I have some information based on this test that I give you, and the faculty and the community college leaders are stretched really thin, because they have to serve a lot of students, they have a lot of demands, so they cannot really engage on this one-on-one that really help you as a student know exactly what is that you really need, and they support you. So to answer your question, I think there's there's a misalignment, and information that we know it's really important, it is not available for the colleges. So what the colleges have been doing, which I don't think it's bad, is that they're basing their decisions on the students' self-reported data. So you say, oh, I finished pre-calc, and I did how many years of math, and this was my GPA. So based on that, they're going to approximate you to the college where you need to be. But what I'm advocating is for combining these systems, because we lose really valuable information. And in California, and like many other states like Texas and Florida, you can have a student identifier, and I have your identifier, and I have your records in elementary, middle, high school, community college, so I can look at your educational trajectories. In California, it took me 5 years to convince and create the trustworthy relationship with the leaders and administrators to get this high school transcript data and this community college data, combine them, and help them say, you need to use high school GPA, number of years of math. I'm making this up. This is exactly the research that we're doing right now. At the highest level of math. And that's going to give you, that's kind of the sweet spot where you guys want to be. The other thing that I forgot to mention that is very interesting is that sometimes the students have the opportunity to self-place. So this MDTP is going to give you the opportunity. Do you want to see if you're in pre-calc, or do you want to see if you're in Algebra 1? And many students, and unsurprisingly many female students and students of color, they underplace. They are insecure about their own math preparation, and they choose a test that is below what they passed in high school, and we don't want that. We want exactly the opposite. We want to empower the students. We need to tell them, all the hard work that you did in high school, we value it. You don't need any refresher. You need to keep moving towards attaining your AA, towards transferring. We need to help you moving. We don't need to keep you back. Yeah.
Were you able to evaluate how this affects non-traditional students who may be going to the workforce right after high school and then go to community college?
That is a very interesting population, and we didn't do it. And so and that's a really good point. Sometimes as researchers, you have to make decisions. And in this case, our population of interest were those students, probably some of you who went right after high school to the community colleges. Because as we know, the beauty of the community college is that this is open access institution, and it's going to be there for you whenever you're ready. But as you suggest, the characteristics of those students who had been out of high school for many years, in many cases they have kids, they have families, they have responsibilities, they might be working 1 or 2 jobs, are very different. We saw, interestingly enough, that for some reason the older students were being placed in higher levels of math. So, I don't know, that we were completely speculating. We were maybe they were taking the test more seriously and they were trying to study a little bit before, and the high school students were feeling much more secure because they just finished high school. We don't know, but that was kind of an interesting finding. Time for a couple more questions. You can ask questions about not only this, but about being a researcher, starting a PhD. Yeah.
What do you suggest that we as students, or just kind of scholars, and specifically community college students, do to combat the system?
That is a great question. So what I would say is that right now your responsibility is to get the education and the skills and the credential and the degrees that will help you get to a point where you can design this research that is really going to make a difference. I also say that one of the beautiful things in California is referred to as the people's democracy. And we know that there's a lot of power in voting. And what we've seen is that sometimes these assembly bills are making substantial changes. So if you're advocating, if you're working with advocacy groups in order to change these practices that are not really helping students, you can make a much faster difference. Like it took me 10 years to document this, and it took these legislators probably years as well, but within one assembly bill, boom, everyone is in line. And everyone needs to be working on the issues that we have been saying, hey guys, like you really need to rethink this, because the way you are doing it right now is not helping students. But it is, as I said before, it's very complex. You have the voices from the leaders, you have the voices from the presidents, you have the voices from the boards, you have the voices from the community, you have the voices from the students. So it is important to have so many voices, because sometimes you don't rush to implement really bad policies, which is what happens in states that have a very centralized system. You can have a really bad idea, and that bad idea is implemented immediately. So at least in California, because of the process that it's so cumbersome, like it takes more time to develop policies that have buy-in from different community members and that are kind of like more tested. So that's, I would say, like a great possibility of the way our governance system is, and also that you're kind of like giving a lot of opportunities for people to kind of think about the populations that they're serving and create the programs that work for them. Because in countries like where I come from, in Colombia, policies are totally top-down. So those policies might work very well for certain groups of students in certain parts of the country, but might not work at all for rural populations or Afro-Colombian populations. So the beauty of this is that you're really empowering the people, the leaders, to make a difference, but the problem is that you kind of like lose control over the implementation. And some colleges, as you all know, have been doing a great job in terms of transferring, and these are kind of like college preparatory colleges. Most of you probably have been or are coming or are still in some of those colleges, and some other colleges don't have the resources and the capacity and the leadership to help the students that they need to help more. So that's problematic, and that's where I think like research empowers you with this data and puts you in a position where you can make a solid argument for your case, and you can stand comfortable with your data in front of a policy maker, in front of a community college president, in front. You can give this to community organizers and say, okay, why are 80% of my Latinos in this arithmetic class in all these colleges? Let's explore this issue. And that can come up, end up with lawsuits that kind of, again, make changes super fast that makes big difference in the life of the students and these families, which are the ones that as researchers we always need to keep in mind. And I remind that to myself every time. It's very easy to start thinking about numbers and getting really infatuated with the numbers, but we always have to remember that each piece of data is alive, and it's a very unique, and we have to be very careful, and we have to really know what we're doing in order to make these policies related to the data that we're getting from the students and their families. Any last question? Yeah.
How much has been written with respect to the effectiveness of the pedagogical practices?
That is a great question. So that's the question that I love to end up with, because that is the research agenda that hopefully many in this room are going to pursue. Because we have learned a lot about what not to do. What we don't know very well are what are the pedagogical strategies that we need to provide to our community college faculty to teach the students. And this is great, and we can talk about that, because some of you might have like high school teacher background, that this is a way, because if you think about high school teachers and community college teachers, they're teaching exactly the same thing. So there's great opportunities there to improve the pedagogical strategies in order to help the students get the knowledge that they need and get to the places where they want to be and need to be. Thank you so much.
Thank you again to Professor Melguizo for coming in to speak with us.